At the Game Awards this year, they showed off a couple games that I wanted to talk about. I've written about both these games at my blog in Forbes. So I thought I'd talk about them a bit here. I've been on Twitter arguing with people about this, as I do from time to time. The first is Intergalactic, the Space Heretic. I think it's called the Heretic Priest. That's an ungainly title. Intergalactic is decent, but tagging on the rest of it, I guess it's to build a franchise, probably. Intergalactic this, and then the second game can be like Intergalactic, the Rainbow of the Cosmos or something. I don't know. And then that's from Naughty Dog. So that's the new, it's like a new sci-fi game from Naughty Dog. It has a cool aesthetic. It's got this, I guess what you'd call cassette futurism aesthetic, which sort of makes it look like the 80s, but in space. And then the second game is The Witcher 4 from CD Projekt Red, which is the first part of a new trilogy set in the Witcher universe. So both exciting games, and I thought there was a lot of really good stuff in both these trailers. And I'll talk about that first, and then we'll talk about kind of the cultural stuff that has riled up the internet. And Intergalactic has, there's not a lot of details, but it's about this character, Jordan, who has found herself at this planet that is cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Basically, for 600 years, this planet has been dark. So anyone who goes there can't escape. They can't leave. And she's a bounty hunter, and I don't know how all of that fits together. But I liked some of the stuff I liked about the trailer was kind of it's just like her spaceship has all these CRT monitors where she's talking to her bounty hunter agent on. And there's like a multi-disc CD player, and it's all very retro 1980s looking. There's product placement, which people were bothered by, like Porsche and Adidas. I don't really think that's a problem. I think that that's kind of done on purpose to kind of mirror things like Alien, and the look of the protagonist is apparently also kind of meant to pay homage to Ripley from Aliens 3. What I think threw me off about this trailer, and I think what's thrown a lot of people off, is the not just the appearance of the protagonist, but kind of her demeanor as well. She looks Asian. The actress that they base her on is black and Asian. And in this trailer, at least, or this cinematic, she looks mostly Asian to me. She doesn't look as black as she does in real life. And she's got a shaved head, buzzed head. And she's wearing like a cool retro red leather jacket. Well, at one point she puts that on. Before that, she's like in a tank top. And then all that's fine. I thought that she'd kind of looked a little less. I know that like in Alien 3, Ripley has the shaved head, but I thought the shaved head looked out of place. There's just something about it. Just didn't quite click with me. As soon as I saw the protagonist, I was like, oh, hold on. I just got the vibe that this is going to be Naughty Dog leaning heavier and heavier into sort of the DEI stuff. Now, I'm not as bothered by DEI stuff as a lot of people are, but I am bothered by how it affects storytelling. And my immediate impression of her personality is that she's kind of going to be a bit of a smug girl boss type character. And I just find that trope very obnoxious. I think there are so many other types of personalities you can give to both men and women in games. You don't have to make all video game characters that are female girl bosses. Of course, we don't have enough to go on here. It's just an impression. And the problem is that I've just consumed so much media that I feel like my impressions are generally right. That's not tooting my own horn. It's just that when you've seen enough, and you've seen enough patterns, and you've seen enough evidence of what something is going to be based on first impressions, you usually are pretty correct in your assumptions. And the worry here is that Naughty Dog will be telling a story that is filled with sort of preachiness. And we've seen this in other video games, like recently in the new Dragon Age game, where there's a non-binary character. And I have no problem with there being a non-binary or trans character in a fantasy game. It's how ham-fisted it was presented in Dragon Age that bugged me. I mean, again, just using the word non-binary in a fantasy setting feels really off to me. And so the concern here is that Naughty Dog's going to double down on sort of what I would call niche identity politics rather than sort of bigger, more compelling universal themes that are more timeless. I will make an example here. In The Last of Us Part 1, that game grappled with political and moral decisions that had consequences and that made you think and that didn't have easy answers, right? The decision Joel makes at the end of that game brings up a really big question in everybody's lives. What is the value of the individual versus the group? Is it morally sound to sacrifice an individual to save the broader populace, or do you save the individual because sacrificing someone to save the larger group is inherently immoral? That's where I fall. I think that if you have to, that Joel made the right decision. But it's a debate that we can have, that anybody can have, regardless of your political beliefs, your race, your religion. There is something there for everyone to come out and discuss in a very nuanced way, right? Because it is a nuanced game, and that's what makes The Last of Us. Personally, I think it was a great game all around. But it was that moment in that game that really I thought was profoundly impactful. And then the second game, there are many problems with the game, including just the fact that it's just so utterly bleak. But the second game started to insert sort of modern day issues into a story that previously was dealing with more universal themes. For instance, having a character at this really goofy, cartoonish cult that they put in this game, having this character be trans, basically. And that felt very like on the nose, like we're going to deal with these modern day issues in a game that really, like, I don't know that it helps or served that game. And that's just one instance. And honestly, that was not even a big problem for me in the game, but it's this movement, it's this push towards more and more of that. Now, again, I think there's room in the gaming space to create a game that deals with trans issues and that deals with those sorts of things, but it's less compelling or less welcome, I guess, to start inserting that stuff into things like Dragon Age or Last of Us, where it just feels a little on the nose and ham-fisted. I would say that in the show, The Last of Us, the episode where with Frank and Bill, am I getting it? Frank and Bill? Where they show their relationship and how it grows, as a gay couple, I thought that was an extremely well made and moving and touching episode. Even though it wasn't really in the game, I thought that that's one way that they sort of, I mean, that show for the most part was very, very true to the game, and they did that, and that was not in the game, but I thought it was a nice way to flesh out these characters. My only problem with that was that, they never had a chance to really interact with the main characters like in the game. But anyways, so the concern here is that these game companies have continued to move in this direction where instead of dealing with these sort of timeless issues, these moral issues in a compelling and thoughtful and thought-provoking way, we're just getting sort of modern day politics stuffed in there in a way that doesn't really make you grapple with these issues in the first place. More in a way that is like a little preachy and propagandistic, right? So that's the concern when you see a character like this. And of course, people are, on Twitter and the reaction to the reaction is, oh, it's just racism. It's just sexism. You're just threatened by having a female protagonist of color, a woman of color. And no, that is absolutely the furthest thing from the truth. I don't think there was much pushback to like Dishonored, Death of the Outsider featuring a woman of color as the protagonist, because that game wasn't trying to do any modern day politics stuff with it. It just had a female protagonist of color. And that's if you want to make a game that deals with, issues of race and all that, that's fine. And I think there's plenty of room for that within these games, but it's the heavy-handedness of the approach that we see that is a turnoff to so many people. And then we have The Witcher 4. What I noticed right away, I was confused. I was not at all surprised to see that Ciri was the protagonist in that trailer, which is a really good trailer for the most part. I wasn't surprised that it was Ciri, but I was confused by how she looked. I had to go look up The Witcher 3 images and footage of her because she looks so different. And a lot of people are saying, oh, no, you're just crazy. Don't believe your lion eyes, right? I'm not. Like, she looks very, very different. And not just older. Her facial shape has changed in a way that I don't think most faces do change, even if it's 10 years or 15 years later. So that threw me off right away. I mean, I knew it was Ciri because she has the scar and everything, but she looked and sounded very different because they have a different voice actor for her. And that could be the reason that her face looks different. It could be that they're using mocap of the actress and she looks different. And so, that could be it. But of course, Geralt looks nothing like the voice actor who plays him. So I don't know. And yes, Geralt's face has changed from game to game, but I think there were very large technological leaps between those games that really made Geralt just look better each time. I mean, you look at The Witcher 1, he looks like crap, honestly. And he's much more ruggedly handsome by the third game. There's other issues in this trailer, though. I like the trailer, but the last line when she... at the end when she's like, there are no gods here, just monsters. That's a good line, but it's so derivative of the killing monsters cinematic for The Witcher 3, which is a phenomenal trailer. And at the end, the bad guy is like, what are you doing? And Geralt says, killing monsters, or whatever. Killing monsters. I could do the voice if I tried at it for a little while, but anyways, so that's a little derivative. And then there's all the other stuff. Like this is a game, so I'm not like super tied to the lore of the books and how this breaks lore. But a lot of people are worried, like, how exactly is Ciri a Witcher? How did she take the Trial of Grasses? What's this mean for her elder blood and all her other powers? Why aren't we seeing those powers in the trailer? Like, she is able to do crazy stuff, like teleport and all this stuff. None of that's here. She looks like a level 1 Witcher in a lot of ways, fighting the monster in this. I mean, she kills it, and she's obviously very badass, but it's not like it's like her power level at the end of Witcher 3 versus this trailer. It does seem off. So there's issues, right? And a lot of people have said, oh, she's been made ugly. She's been made uglier because this is the directive of all this DEI money, and that's all interesting. I do think she looks perfectly attractive in the new trailer. I mean, I don't think she's ugly at all. She just looks different, and that threw me off. But I do think that there's an interesting thing going on right now, because if The Witcher 4 had debuted this trailer in 2018, 3 years after The Witcher 3 came out, I don't think there would be really much pushback at all to Ciri being the protagonist or having a female protagonist. I think that one of the consequences of all of the overly woke SJW, social justice, DEI shit that we've seen over the last 10 years or so, I think one of the consequences has been people are now more reactionary than ever. I think that all of that stuff has been a gift for the right wing. It's been a gift for right-wing culture warriors. I think that it's just fed into the fuel of this culture war in a way that I don't personally think helps the people that they're trying to help. I don't think it's helped the cause of having more diversity and more female protagonists and so forth in games. I think it's led to a lot of backlash and reaction, to the point where people are reacting now to things far, far more antagonistically than they would have, I mean, even 20 or 30 years ago. I bring up the movie Hook from time to time. Hook is a wonderful movie. I don't care what anybody says. I love that movie. And the Lost Boys are very diverse. There's like white Lost Boys, black Lost Boys, Hispanic Lost Boys. There's all this diversity in that movie. And I mean, I know I was young when it came out, but I don't remember seeing anything or hearing anything from anybody that was like, oh my God, they made, they're forcing this diversity. They're just they're just doing it. There was no reaction to that movie in that way. It was just like, okay, cool. Because we hadn't had, because we didn't have Twitter or Reddit for one thing, but because we hadn't had all of this, these years of where it does feel forced, where it does feel like there's just a sort of tokenistic box checking diversity going on. I don't think there was any reaction to like Lara Croft being a female protagonist when Tomb Raider came out, or Samus Aran in Metroid, or any of these characters, Bayonetta. I mean, the only reaction to Bayonetta was from, angry SJWs who were like, oh, they're sexualizing her, and missing the entire point that Bayonetta's sexuality was powerful and dangerous and, sex positive. And Bayonetta, by all rights, should be an icon of feminism in video games, but for the longest time was considered the opposite of that. So this is what happens, I think. This is what happens. And I bring this up with the election and with Trump winning and sort of this whole movement, how conservatism has gained such momentum in recent years with this very different brand of conservatism. And I think that so much identity politics has been a big cause of this. And people will say, oh, well, Kamala Harris didn't push all this stuff that hard, and this is just economics. And it's true. I mean, whatever. Kamala Harris didn't push this stuff that hard, but I'm not talking about specific politicians. I'm talking about a cultural thing, something we've seen in media, in video games, something we've seen with, the rise of like pronouns and all this other stuff. It's not that these things are bad inherently, like having compassion for people and wanting diversity and wanting more female protagonists in video games. None of those things are inherently bad, but it's the way that they've been sort of top-downified, right? A lot of this stuff sort of put in, whether people want it or not, right? And you get calls for like, James Bond should be a woman. Well, no, James Bond is James Bond. He should be a man. And you get, I really liked the latest Uncharted game, but you have a series of Uncharted games with Nathan Drake as the male protagonist, and then suddenly you have a game where it's two female protagonists. Personally, again, I don't mind, but like, what would happen if the new Tomb Raider came out and it was a white dude? There'd be a huge backlash to that. So it does feel like when you keep taking established franchises and established things and then swapping that rather than creating new franchises and with new heroes, that there's going to be an understandable backlash to that. And that when these things keep piling up more and more and more, you start to get that compounded backlash to where it becomes a really big issue for a lot of people. And then people start reacting to things in ways they wouldn't have before. 10 years ago, I don't think that Ciri being the next protagonist of The Witcher would have been that big of a deal. But now some people are upset about it. I think overall, a lot of fans of the Witcher series aren't, because Ciri's always been an important character, really important character in the books and in the games and everything. So having her become the next main character isn't a bad thing, beyond just the questions of how is she actually a Witcher and what happened to her powers. And why didn't we get a Ciri game where she was, more that powerful Ciri character rather than becoming a Witcher, which is just, anyways. That's kind of where I'm seeing all of this in media, in games. The more that this stuff is sort of pushed on people rather than written organically into the scripts, into the games, the more people push back. And so you get like more extreme examples. Like I was looking at all these GIFs and images and whatnot from the first Descendant. And it's like, it's like these women in barely anything with like butts jiggling and all this stuff. And it's such a wild contrast to what you're seeing in like Star Wars Outlaws or these other games, where it does feel like in Star Wars Outlaws, like they've made this character based on the actress who plays her, but the character is not nearly as good looking as the actress, who's quite beautiful. And it's like, are you really making your characters less beautiful on purpose just to sort of be like, everyone's beautiful, and everyone is beautiful? I mean, there's nothing wrong with different looking characters in games, but I mean, there is a reason why most stars in most TV shows are really good looking people. I mean, that's just what people want to watch. We can't all be as good looking as movie stars, but we want to watch good looking people in our movies, right? We just do. It's just something about the way our brains work and our biology. And it's no different in games. Like, we want to play as, if I'm playing some first person shooter, I want to be playing as like a Spec Ops guy who's really tough and like can shoot a gun and is ruggedly handsome and all these things. Because I'm not a spec ops guy. I can't go around and shoot like dozens of enemies and like fall off buildings and shit. So I want somebody in my games who is more heroic and more and better looking and stronger and tougher than I am, right? And same for the women that we played. It's no different. We want beautiful women. It's not just because of the male gaze. It's not just because we're trying to sexualize everything. I mean, I get all these comments, like, oh, well, you can't jerk off to her now? Like, I'm sorry, do you not understand how men work? Like, we can jerk off to just about anything. That's not the point. Like, the point is that when we're playing video games, we want our characters to just be better, just in general. Again, I'm totally down to play a video game where the protagonist is a fat, bald dude who, in the proper context, that could be very entertaining, right? And there's room for all this stuff, but it is this trend to just make characters look worse, especially women characters look worse, that feels sort of pandery and forced, and just goes against the grain of what everything else in our entertainment industry really is about. And it feels hypocritical, honestly. Not so much that they're trying to make a change for the better, but that they're just trying to pat themselves on the back. So the backlash compounds. People react more strongly to smaller things every year. And I just feel like this is actually making things worse. It's similar. We'll just dip our toes into this, but in the trans movement, I think that transphobia is worse today than it was 10 years ago. I think it's much worse. And despite all the efforts to like have people use pronouns and to like degender bathrooms, all these things that have been done have actually, I think, made transphobia worse overall in our culture. Because it's this top-down approach to equality and to, you can enforce rules, but you can't enforce compassion. You can't make people feel a certain way. That takes a lot more work. It's like you can go bomb the shit out of Iraq, but you can't force people to adopt Western values there. You cannot force your culture onto a country and a population that doesn't have the same history and religion and civil society and all that stuff. You can't do it. It's the same kind of sort of shock and awe approach, but in media and entertainment, and it's not helping. It is making the reaction worse. This is why, as someone who considers himself to be liberal and on the left, that I find all this stuff so frustrating, because it feels like all the things that I do care about, and these are all things I do care about, it feels like they are being undermined by the people who are the loudest advocates and activists in this movement. I see some of the words I see often directed at people who are critical of sort of the woke side of things, the anti-woke, is incel. That's one. That's used all the time, and it's the silliest shorthand. It's like the equivalent of like libtard or soy boy to me. Like it's meaningless. It's bullshit. And then grifter. So many people are described as grifters just for having a different opinion. And the crazy thing to me is that there absolutely are grifters. There are grifters on the right and there are grifters on the left as well. The grifters on the left, I think a lot of them are pushing these very things we're talking about, pushing this sort of DEI stuff, and they're doing it to make themselves look good and to make money rather than to actually help people, I think. And I think that you see how this, I mean, some of them are. Again, not everyone who's pushing these ideas is a grifter on either side. Some are true believers. Some really do want to help people, but I think there is a lot of pushing this stuff to enrich and empower and to look good and to gain social status. And that inauthenticity is something that people can smell, right? It doesn't pass the smell test. So, I just think that that's why we're seeing reactions like this. We're seeing such large reactions to this, or, again, something like Assassin's Creed. If Assassin's Creed, Shadows, is it? The one set in Japan. There's so many Assassin's Creeds, I get all the names mixed up. I think the backlash to Yosuke being a black samurai, I think that if this game had been announced 10 years ago, there would have been a much, much less backlash. If this game had been announced pre-Gamergate, much less backlash. Maybe no backlash. Maybe just a little backlash, right? But because it's in 2024, because that's when we're talking about it, the conversation is more of a war zone rather than a dialogue, right? What's to be done? How does this change? I think it is changing. I do. I think that there has been the signs of change all around. I think that you're seeing this, especially because Trump was reelected. I think that you're seeing more people in positions of power start to sort of back off of this stuff. I think that it's going to take a lot of time, and I think that because these movies and these games and all this take so long to produce and make, I think that you're going to keep seeing this stuff for years. And then the really tricky thing is going to be the course correction that doesn't just like swing the pendulum to a right-wing reactionary thing where, where the really, really reactionary people who only want, video game protagonists to be men. And we don't want to return to a time like that. We want to find a better way, right? Where there is still diversity, where there is still representation and all that, but it feels organic, where more stories are being told, where it's not just these hand-me-down, race-swapping, box checking. How do we get to there? That's the thing that I'm projecting out 5 years, and I'm thinking, what does the course correction look like? How does this shift to something where we still have made progress towards a better world and more equality, but in a way that doesn't feel forced, that doesn't feel top down, that doesn't feel artificial and inauthentic, right? How does that work? I don't know. I guess by just continuing to try to be sane in an insane world, or insane in a sane world, whatever. Like by staying true to your values. There's all this talk about like red pilling. So many people have been red pilled. And it would be easy to do, right? It would be easy to be red pilled, I feel like, because of all the unattractiveness of leftist politics in the last decade or so. But I feel like my values haven't changed. Like my deep held values, the things that I believe, haven't changed in 10 years. I mean, some of my ideas have shifted and evolved, absolutely, but I still believe what I've always believed about human decency and how you treat people. And I haven't shifted to the right. I don't vote for Republicans. I'm critical of this stuff because I believe that the left should be better than this. And because, like I said, it's a gift to right-wing culture warriors. All this stuff just gives them so much content and gunpowder, right? But I think the trick is to stay true to your values, regardless of what's happening in the political spectrum, right? Stay true to your beliefs, regardless of how, how this shifts around you. You still have to do that. I was actually, during Gamergate in 2014, 2015, I can't remember exactly, I was actually offered a job by Milo Yiannopoulos to work at Breitbart, which I turned down. I was told I would have total freedom, and I didn't have to like toe any sort of line. I didn't have to toe conservative line. I could still, but I didn't want to go that. Well, first of all, I like Forbes, but second of all, I didn't want to be that I didn't want to sell myself to any devils, right? I didn't want to go fight for any side. Like at that point, I could have made a choice. I could have been like, all right, well, I'm going to throw my hat in this ring. I could probably be like working for the Trump machine right now if I'd had the proper ambition and lack of scruples necessary. But yeah, I don't think that that's the way to go. I think you have to hold fast to your own beliefs, even in a crazy world where tribalism is so powerful. And that's how you come out the other side of shifting cultural moments and still work to create a better world and better games and better movies, better TV shows, better writing. I'm on a ramble, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to stop it here. I did like both those trailers, more or less. There was also other stuff like the new Elden Ring Night Rain, which I suppose I should talk about at some point. I have no idea what to think about that. I'm not super excited. I think it'll be fun, but it's certainly not the way I want to see From Software go in general. But more on that later. And I've got so many other videos I need to make. I need to talk about the season 3 of From, and I need to talk about the Penguin and other stuff. And I've been terrible about it because sometimes I can sit down and talk for half an hour like this and just blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I go to make a video and it's just like my mind draws a blank. And so rather than making a shitty video, I just don't make anything at all. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, shout out in the comments.
Pandering, slandering, such a fraud. Snoop Dogg.